Okay, so strap yourselves in for this deep dive, folks. Today, we're wading into some pretty murky waters, Malaysian politics, to be precise. We're dissecting this really provocative opinion piece by Rafique Rashid, and it's causing quite a stir.
Right.
It's basically accusing the prime minister of, well, meddling with the legal system. Like, is he pulling the strings?
Yeah, it's pretty serious stuff.
So maybe you can help break down what's at the core of all of this.
Well, it boils down to the prime minister's recent comments. He's essentially saying that some past prosecutions, back in 2018, were just politically motivated.
Okay, so right off the bat, that sounds like it could be a problem.
Yeah, because that whole notion really undermines a cornerstone principle, the separation of powers.
The separation of powers.
It's kind of like the bedrock of a fair and functioning government, right?
So like checks and balances to make sure no one gets too much power.
Exactly. You've got the executive branch, that's where the prime minister sits, the legislature, our lawmakers, and then the judiciary, the courts.
Like a three-legged stool.
Exactly. Each one needs to stand on its own right.
Otherwise, the whole thing collapses.
Precisely. So when the prime minister starts making statements that could be perceived as influencing the legal process, it raises some red flags.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. But before we get too deep into that, can we talk about the attorney general's role for a second? Because I think that's crucial to understanding this whole thing.
Absolutely. The attorney general is like the gatekeeper of the justice system.
Gatekeepers?
Yeah, like they have immense power in deciding who gets prosecuted, if charges are dropped or even brought back. It's a lot of responsibility.
Wow, okay, so when the prime minister makes these comments about past prosecutions being politically motivated.
It's like he's stepping on the attorney general's toes, making it look like they're not impartial, but maybe, influenced by political pressure.
I see. It's like he's questioning the attorney general's independence.
Exactly.
So let's get into the specifics. What did the prime minister actually say?
Okay, so he basically claimed that prosecutions back in 2018, and he specifically pointed to cases involving members of his own party, were driven by, and I quote, political vengeance.
Whoa, political vengeance? That's some strong language.
Right.
And didn't his party happen to be in power in 2018?
Yes, they were. And not only that, his spouse was the deputy prime minister at the time.
Oh, and there's another piece to this puzzle, isn't there? The prime minister himself received a royal pardon that same year.
You got it. And that pardon was for a conviction related to, wait for it, abuse of power and corruption.
Hold on, let me get this straight. He was pardoned for corruption, and now he's accusing others of being prosecuted for political reasons during that same time.
Yep, you got it. And the author of this opinion piece really hones in on that. Like, how can you say those prosecutions were just for revenge when you yourself were caught up in something similar?
It definitely seems like a double standard.
It does, doesn't it?
And this all ties back to something else we should probably talk about. Dr. Mahathir's campaign promise. He made a big deal about cracking down on corruption if he was elected, right?
Oh, yeah, that was a cornerstone of his campaign.
So we've got the prime minister getting a pardon for corruption and then suggesting that prosecutions under Dr. Mahathir were politically motivated.
Right.
The author is basically calling out this incredible contrast. It makes you wonder, did they actually care about cleaning up corruption, or was it all just talk?
It definitely makes you question their motives. It erodes public trust, You start thinking, can we believe anything these politicians say?
Yeah, that's a dangerous road to go down.
I'm like, yeah.
But there's another layer to this whole mess that we need to untangle.
Okay, what's that?
This thing called DNAs.
Ah, yes.
It's like some kind of legal loophole. Can you explain what it is and how it plays into all of this?
So DNA stands for discharge, not amounting to acquittal. It's basically like a pause button on a prosecution.
Pause button.
The case is stopped, but the charges aren't completely dismissed. They can be brought back later.
Okay, so it's like a temporary reprieve.
Right. And the concern here is that these DNAs are being used selectively.
Selectively.
There's this growing perception that they're being handed out as favors, like get-out-of-jail-free cards for those with political connections.
So it's like one set of rules for those in power and another for everyone else.
Yeah, and the author of this piece points to several high-profile cases that fit that pattern.
It's like that saying, justice is blind, but it can still peek through its fingers.
Exactly. And the author highlights a few cases, like that famous case from a few years back. That one blew up because it seemed like a clear example of bias in the system.
Oh, I remember that one. It was all over the news.
Yeah, and these cases add fuel to the fire, making people think, hang on, is the legal system really fair? Or is it just a tool for the powerful?
And then there's the timing of the prime minister's statement.
Yeah.
Why bring this up now, years after the fact?
Yeah, it is suspicious, isn't it?
What do you think is going on there?
Well, the author suggests it could be a strategic move, you know? Elections are coming up, and maybe this is a way to deflect attention from past scandals.
Ah, so it's like a pre-election smokescreen.
Exactly. Create enough confusion, cast doubt on your opponents, and maybe people will forget about the past.
Classic political maneuver.
Unfortunately, yes.
But ultimately, this isn't just about political games. It's about public trust in the legal system.
Right. And the author makes a strong point. If the Attorney General doesn't address these concerns head-on, it's going to further erode that trust.
It's like saying, if you're truly independent, prove it.
That's a good way to put it.
So where does this leave us?
Well, we've got a prime minister whose motives are being questioned, potential misuse of DNAs, and a whole lot of public distrust in the legal system.
Yeah, it's enough to make your head spin.
But here's the thing for everyone listening to think about. Even if the Attorney General does respond, will it be enough to restore faith in the system? What would it actually take to convince people that justice is still blind? That's something to chew on, folks. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.